Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving deep into a story that gripped the world. A saga that unfolded right before our eyes and sparked outrage, debate, and a whole lot of heads scratching across continents. I'm talking about a visa decision that didn't just affect one person. It sent shockwaves through the entire global community, leaving fans absolutely furious and igniting a firestorm of controversy that still echoes today. Imagine this: a global superstar, at the absolute peak of his career, flying halfway across the world to compete in a major championship he's dominated for years. He lands, expecting to defend his title, only to be detained, interrogated, and ultimately deported in a dramatic turn of events that felt more like a spy thriller than a sporting event. This wasn't just about tennis, folks. It was about national sovereignty, individual liberty, public health, and the sheer power of a government to say no, even to the most famous among us. I remember watching this unfold in real time, glued to my screen, just like millions of you were. It felt surreal, like a scene ripped straight from a movie script. But it was all too real. We're going to unpack every single twist and turn of this incredible story, from the initial whispers of an exemption to the final, heartbreaking deportation, exploring the legal battles, the political maneuvering, and the immense public reaction that made this so much more than just a visa dispute. So grab a snack, settle in, because this is going to be a long, detailed, and absolutely wild ride into one of the most polarizing events in recent memory. Our story begins in late 2021, with the world still very much in the grip of the COVID-19 pandemic. Australia, known for its incredibly strict border controls, had implemented some of the toughest public health measures on the planet, including mandatory vaccination for anyone entering the country. This was Fortress Australia, a nation determined to keep the virus out. And they weren't messing around, even for international celebrities or athletes. The Australian Open, one of the 4 Grand Slam tennis tournaments, was fast approaching, and the organizers had made it clear: no jab, no play, unless you had a legitimate medical exemption. Now, enter our protagonist, Novak Djokovic, a name synonymous with tennis greatness. He was, at the time, the world's #1 male tennis player, a 9-time Australian Open champion, and he was chasing a record-breaking 21st Grand Slam title. Djokovic had been very public about his personal stance on vaccination, choosing not to receive the COVID-19 vaccine, which immediately put him on a collision course with Australia's strict entry requirements. This created a huge amount of tension and speculation in the lead-up to the tournament, with everyone wondering how this seemingly unresolvable conflict would play out. Then, on January 4, 2022, the bombshell dropped. Djokovic announced on social media that he had received a medical exemption and was on his way to Australia. This news immediately sparked outrage among many Australians who had endured strict lockdowns and sacrificed so much, feeling that a celebrity was getting special treatment. They had followed the rules. They had gotten vaccinated. And the idea that someone could bypass these measures, even with an exemption, felt like a slap in the face to their collective efforts and sacrifices. It was a deeply emotional issue for a nation that had been through so much. The exemption itself was granted by 2 independent medical panels, organized by Tennis Australia and the state of Victoria, based on the grounds that Djokovic had recently recovered from a COVID-19 infection in December. This was a critical detail, as recent infection was one of the accepted reasons for a temporary medical exemption under Australian Technical Advisory Group on Immunisation Guidelines. However, the exact details of his exemption, and whether it met the federal government's criteria for entry, remained a murky area, setting the stage for the drama that was about to unfold at the border. The lines between state and federal rules, and what constituted a valid exemption for entry, were about to become very blurry. Djokovic boarded his flight, presumably confident that his exemption would allow him smooth passage into the country. He arrived in Melbourne on the evening of January 5th, ready to prepare for the tournament. But what awaited him was anything but smooth. Instead of a warm welcome, he was immediately detained by officers from the Australian Border Force, or ABF, at Melbourne Airport. This was the moment the saga truly began, transforming a routine arrival into an international incident. And the world watched in disbelief as the greatest tennis player on the planet was held in an airport room for several agonizing hours. Djokovic was held in a room at the airport, his phone confiscated, undergoing an intense interrogation by border officials. The ABF officers questioned the validity of his medical exemption, arguing that it did not meet the strict requirements for unvaccinated non-citizens entering Australia. They determined that his visa, which was a subclass 408 temporary activity visa, had been granted based on information that was now deemed insufficient or incorrect by the federal authorities. This was a crucial point, as the initial exemption was for playing tennis in Victoria, not necessarily for entering the country under federal law. At around 4 a.m. local time, after hours of back and forth, the ABF made its decision. Djokovic's visa was officially cancelled. He was informed that he would be deported, and he was then transferred to an immigration detention hotel, the Park Hotel, a facility often used to house asylum seekers. This hotel was certainly not the five-star accommodation he was accustomed to, and the stark contrast highlighted the seriousness of the situation. It was a dramatic and humiliating turn for a global icon, instantly sparking outrage from his fans and the Serbian government. The world reacted with a mixture of shock, anger, and confusion. Djokovic's family held emotional press conferences in Belgrade, condemning his treatment as political persecution and an attack on human rights. Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić publicly accused the Australian government of harassing Djokovic, calling for his immediate release and better treatment. This wasn't just a sports story anymore. It had rapidly escalated into a diplomatic incident, drawing in heads of state and turning a visa dispute into a matter of national pride and international relations. But Djokovic wasn't going down without a fight. His legal team immediately launched an appeal against the visa cancellation, arguing that the ABF had denied him procedural fairness and that his medical exemption was indeed valid under the relevant rules. They worked tirelessly through the weekend, preparing their case to be heard in the Federal Circuit and Family Court of Australia. This was a high-stakes legal battle, not just for Djokovic's career, but for the principle of due process and the interpretation of complex immigration laws. The court hearing took place on Monday, January 10th, and it was live-streamed, allowing millions around the world to witness the legal arguments unfold. Djokovic's lawyers contended that he had been misled by Australian officials and Tennis Australia regarding the requirements for entry, and that he had not been given sufficient time to respond to the ABF's intention to cancel his visa. They emphasized that he had followed all the advice he was given and genuinely believed his exemption was in order. The focus was heavily on the process, not just the substance of the exemption itself. Judge Anthony Kelly, presiding over the case, ultimately ruled in Djokovic's favor, overturning the ABF's decision to cancel his visa. The judge found that Djokovic had not been given adequate time to consult with his lawyers and present his case before the cancellation, thus denying him procedural fairness. This was a significant victory for Djokovic, based on a technicality of process rather than a definitive ruling on the validity of his exemption itself. The judge ordered his immediate release from detention and the return of his passport and personal belongings, allowing him to finally step out into the Melbourne sunshine. For a brief, glorious moment, it seemed like the nightmare was over. Djokovic was free. He trained on Rod Laver Arena, and it looked like he would indeed be playing in the Australian Open. His fans rejoiced, seeing it as a victory for individual rights and a rebuke to what they perceived as heavy-handed government action. The tennis world breathed a collective sigh of relief, anticipating the return of their champion to the court. It felt like a triumph against bureaucracy, a moment where common sense and fairness had prevailed, at least for a little while. However, the Australian government was far from finished. The Minister for Immigration, Alex Hawke, held a unique and powerful discretionary power under Section 133C of the Migration Act. This power allowed him to personally cancel a visa if he was satisfied that it was in the public interest to do so, regardless of any court rulings on procedural fairness. This was a political power, a final trump card that could override legal technicalities, and it hung like a dark cloud over Djokovic's temporary freedom. The public interest argument could encompass a wide range of factors, including public health, good order, and even maintaining public confidence in government policy. Days passed with intense speculation, as Minister Hawke deliberated, facing immense pressure from both sides. On one hand, there was the court ruling and the international outcry from Djokovic's supporters. On the other, there was significant public sentiment within Australia demanding that no one, not even a sports star, should be above the rules. The government was acutely aware of the upcoming federal election and the need to appear strong on border policy, especially after the initial public backlash against Djokovic's exemption. The stakes were incredibly high, both politically and personally. Finally, on Friday, January 14th, just days before the Australian Open was set to begin, Minister Hawke announced his decision. He had re-cancelled Novak Djokovic's visa. His reasoning was clear. It was in the public interest to do so, primarily because Djokovic's presence in Australia could excite anti-vaccination sentiment and potentially lead to civil unrest. This was a powerful and controversial argument, suggesting that Djokovic's mere presence, given his unvaccinated status and public profile, posed a risk to public health and good order, even if he wasn't actively campaigning against vaccines. This second cancellation plunged Djokovic back into legal limbo and detention, once again at the Park Hotel. His legal team immediately sprang into action, launching a second, even more urgent appeal, this time to the full Federal Court of Australia. This was a much higher court, and the legal challenge was significantly more difficult. The scope of appeal against a ministerial discretionary power is very narrow. The court couldn't simply substitute its own opinion for the minister's. Instead, it had to determine if the minister's decision was irrational, illogical, or legally flawed in some way, a much higher bar to clear. The second hearing took place over the weekend, on January 15th and 16th. With the world once again watching intently, Djokovic's lawyers argued that Minister Hawke's decision was irrational and lacked proper evidentiary basis, particularly his claim that Djokovic's presence would incite anti-vaccination sentiment. They presented evidence that Djokovic had not actively promoted anti-vaccine views in Australia and that deporting him could, ironically, inflame anti-vaccine sentiment even further. They also argued that the minister had failed to consider the significant public interest in allowing the world number one to compete. However, the government's legal team powerfully defended Minister Hawke's decision, emphasizing the broad discretionary nature of the power and the minister's right to make a judgment call on public interest. They argued that Djokovic's high profile, combined with his publicly known unvaccinated status, inherently carried the risk of influencing public opinion, regardless of his explicit statements. They also highlighted the importance of maintaining the integrity of Australia's border policies and public health messaging during a pandemic. It was a compelling argument about national sovereignty and the government's right to protect its citizens. On Sunday, January 16th, the full federal court delivered its unanimous verdict. It upheld Minister Hawke's decision to cancel Djokovic's visa. The court found that the minister's decision was not irrational or legally unreasonable, given the broad scope of his discretionary power and the public interest considerations he was entitled to weigh. This was the final legal blow, meaning there were no further avenues for appeal. Djokovic's fate was sealed. He would not be playing in the Australian Open. Following the court's decision, Djokovic was immediately escorted to Melbourne Airport and boarded a flight out of Australia. He released a statement expressing his